You are now listening to the Here for the Truth podcast, hosted by Joel Rafidi and Yerasimos.
Ladies and gentlemen, the return of Jaguar Heart, our first ever guest, throwing it back all the way to episode 3, the man who broke the ice on Here for the Truth podcast. Brother, so glad to have you back. For those that want an initiation into who Jag is, check out episode 3. He is an incredible human being, a brother, and a therapist specializing in removing subconscious limitations. What's going on, man?
So good to be back, fellas. Like, what a journey you guys have been on, and myself as well, since we did our first initiation into this, man. It's so good to watch you guys just reach new heights, and the messages you guys are spreading are profound. We've tried to do another podcast a couple of times, but it hasn't worked out due to timing. But mate, so good to be back, and I'm pumped. And yeah, we've got some awesome things to talk about today, which I'm looking forward to.
Same here, man.
Yeah, dude, absolutely, man. Like, it's crazy to think that it's been a year since then, and also just contemplating like how much is possible in a year when you choose authenticity, when you choose to walk a path of integrity and truth. You know, because I know for me personally, like I used to resent the years passing because I wasn't living in authenticity. You know what I mean? I was sitting in my hands. I was leaving my potential on the sidelines. I was leaving my dreams by the wayside. And you resent the years passing. It's like, fuck, another year's passed. What have I done? How am I ever going to get there? I'm getting older, et cetera, et cetera. But then you spend 1 year in true alignment with true purpose. And it's like, literally, man, mountains can be moved.
Yeah, and that's beautiful to what you said. You said, you know, what's possible. The first thing I thought about, well, what's not possible anymore? And what's not possible is wasting time, speaking shit, hanging around people that aren't aligned, buying into the narrative that's no longer serving you. So, and I think I spoke about this in my first podcast with you guys, like I'm all about the process of negation and moving things out of the way. You know, it's about removing things, and we remove what's not possible, which is I just can't not speak the truth anymore. It's like I'm in like chains if I do it, and I just don't partake in it anymore. So that's why we're so aligned, because, you know, it's just some of your posts, man, have just been like, yes, brother, yes, like speak the truth, you know, makes people uncomfortable. But I feel like, you know, that's what strong men are here to do. We have to speak the truth, and we have to stand in truth, regardless of vitriol or attack or anything that comes forward. So that's not possible for me anymore. And to be able to stand there and say, oh, just kind of wrap everyone up in cotton wool, like, fuck that, the time for that's done.
I like what you said there, man. And particularly in terms of moving things out of the way, that's the reason I speak the way I speak. That's the reason I speak my truth. It moves out of the way everything that's not meant for me, everything that's not in alignment with my path. You know what I mean? I'm signaling to the world every time I say something or post something, you know what I mean, where I'm going and who's not going to walk alongside me at the same time, you know?
Yeah, one of my favorite posts you did was, and this will be paraphrasing not verbatim, was like, imagine like being double penetrated, jabbed with poison, so you can celebrate walking into a shop. You know, like it's just, oh, it's beautiful, man. It's so poetic, but so true. You know, love it, love it.
Thanks, brother. Man, today we want to talk about what it really means to be a high value man. So,
cool.
Can you lay the foundations for us and get this rolling?
Yeah, so I speak a fair bit about that in my work and also in some of my posts. And I've been getting a little more direct in the way that it's been done. You know, I just did a post this morning around like the extremism around porn and women being celebrated by, you know, becoming prostitutes and strippers and having a slutty phase and getting their notch count up in the name of sexual liberation. And I basically said in it that no woman that's got any value wants a man that's addicted to extreme porn that doesn't honor them or know themselves. Mm-hmm. And no man wants a woman that's sleeping with fucking 10 dudes at one time in the name of sexual liberation, while their womb is a dumping ground for trauma and probably some sort of spiritual interference. Mm-hmm. So what I looked at was what's the number one attribute that a man really wants? And that's freedom, right? As men, we're built to want to be free. So what does that look like? You know, so the first thing we look at is what do women see men as? And this will probably rattle some cages, but women see men as success and security objects. That's basically it. They run by a biological nature called hypergamy, which is to basically level up. So they want to marry up And what they'll do is they'll want the strongest or the most capable alpha in the group. And usually what really women want is to be able to control and subdue the strongest male. What they'll do, they'll turn the alpha into a beta, get rid of him, and then go for another alpha. So when you know the biologics of it, then you can start to sort of understand the nature of it. But what that will do, and there's a beautiful quote, I think it's by, I can't remember who it's by actually, that a good man will make a woman stronger, but a woman will make a strong man weaker. Okay. Now, what this is because when they're not in alignment with really what they want to do, sex will weaken a man. Okay. So men will see women as sex objects, women will see men as success objects. So we have to know the nature of biology and interrelational gender dynamics. Men are logic and reasoning. We're analytical in the way we approach things. That's like if we have an issue, to be like, all right, Joel, I've got an issue. And you're like, what's up? I'm like, this is up. And you're like, cool, man, got it. Sorry. You're like, sweet, let's go have a beer or let's go play some pool, whatever. And you forget about it. You never bring it up. Women are behavioral and emotional. So this is why men have a difficult time in understanding the dynamics between, like, a woman will be like, you're walking out and you go, hey, babe, I'm going out to see the guys for a little while. Oh, yeah, okay, fine. It's like, okay, cool, see you later. Then half an hour later, you get text on, can't believe you left me, blah, 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 blah. So they operate behaviorally and emotionally. Mm-hmm. Men operate logically and analytically. So that's the first thing we need to understand. That's why they say men are from Mars, women are from Venus. The high value man, the first thing a man needs is purpose. He needs some sort of mission and drive. And never, ever, ever make a woman your number one priority in your life. She might say that she wants it, but she won't respect you over time. She'll feel unsafe. She'll lose sexual interest in you. She'll lose desire for you and respect, and she'll go find someone else. So the first thing to do it is you have to be working towards mission, purpose, be on point, on purpose, and be conscious. That's the first thing. The part about it is, men, we're meant to build, we're meant to create. You know, we want to do things. We want to create legacy. That's in our DNA. That's what we're supposed to do. So the first thing is mission, right? Then you want to look at controlling and conquering the mind. Because if we're in the wild, we're going to have to use our mind to be able to survive. We're not going to out wrestle a bear. We're not going to kill a tiger with our bare hands. We have to use our mind to do so. So we've got the neocortex. Human beings have the neocortex, which animals don't. And so that allows us the ability to be self-referential. We're able to understand the concept of the God. We're able to look at each other and go, there's a me, a you, there's a we, and we're able to generate connection through the neocortex. Animals don't have that developed as we do. So that's the second thing we need to do, is understand the nature of the mind. As a man, if you get the mind in check, you'll be good. You know, Marcus Aurelius says it the best. He goes, thoughts are the colors that dye the soul. Right. So once we understand the nature of the mental constructs that we're in, we can start to play the game. Right. And then what we need to do is we need to build a life around that. So I say, if you're between 35 to 45, you're on point, you're on purpose, you're a conscious, awakened male. So you're not buying into the blind obedience of the matrix of hookup culture, fast food, seed oils, you know, completely denigrating and disrespecting yourself, sleeping around, all that sort of stuff. Watching porn's a big one, which we can get into today. So that's the process of removing all of that. And then what we do is we start to look at traditional aspects of what made a man: virtue, honor, legacy, strength, pride, courage, and the ability to stand alone with his other brothers and be able to move forward, right? So if we have these attributes, plus we start to work through our childhood trauma, and also another part of it, which is not essential, if you don't come with an ex-wife or two ex-wives or three with, you know, multiple mothers, multiple kids to multiple mothers, and you're largely free, you are a high-value male. So the way I live my life, I can work from anywhere. I make a significant amount of money. I'm in the top 0.1% of earners. I don't have an ex-wife with kids. I'm on point, I'm on purpose. I've found my mission. I'm actively working in it. And I would never make a woman my number one priority. And I have freedom to move wherever I want, whenever I want, within reason, without COVID, of course. Then I'm in the top 0.1% of males around. And so that's what we want to work towards. But the first thing you need is purpose. That's the absolute first thing I can say about generating any high-value male.
That's amazing, man. Real quickly, you were bringing up logic and reason. Now, those are foundational elements of a man, but we see in our culture where men have been so feminized that they're behaving more from a behavioral and emotional place. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I talk about this a lot, where it's really out there in the lexicon, where I've seen videos of women holding their men crying in their arms. And I'm like, oh, like I look at it and I just go, no, this is not the way. If you want to express emotions, like the way that I do it is I'll go, and my partner says about me, she goes, the thing that I love the most about you is you just handle your shit. So if I'm going through something real hard, I'll say to her, I'm like, I'll come back to you when I'm ready. I need to sit in this and work through this and face my own stuff. So I'm a fan of men's groups, but men's groups I find are becoming like women's groups. They're just like a bunch of hens sitting around clucking, talking about their shit and not getting anywhere. That's just dumping. Just because it's in front of men, what they're doing is actually starting to biologically buy into and program themselves for the verbal conditioning that women have. So men have an average of around 1,000 words a day they need to get out. Women have 10,000. So if we're just in men's groups, dumping everything on each other, then it starts to become programming for where we're operating emotionally. We become unstable. We talk about our problems all the time. And then what we do is we start to operate more in the feminine aspect, which is being driven by emotion, rather than a bit more what I'm a fan of is stoicism, where a man can handle large amounts of pain and look largely unfazed by it, but still be able to go and face his own stuff. And so what we're seeing is the feminization of men in society. Now, why would that be? And this happens in porn too. So a lot of men that watch porn continually, they get turned on by watching other men fuck women. Okay, that's the beta cuck, like the typical beta cuck. And now what that means is that their proclivity towards sexuality is to be dominated by a woman that will say, I want to sleep with other men. So that's an emotional thing. So if we're betas, we're going to be driven by our emotional need for it, like for insecurity and security. There's neediness that's going to be driven out of it. Clinginess will let the women do whatever they want. And so our society is driving all these men to constantly be vulnerable, constantly talk about their emotions, constantly be talking about their feelings. That makes their woman feel unsafe because she's not going to be able to trust that when it comes down to it, he's going to be strong and stable enough to be in control of his emotions. And she's going to feel unsafe. The polarity is going to shift from a magnetism perspective. She'll lose desire for him and she'll start operating logically and analytically.
Yeah, man. I've heard this from so many women, and I'm curious your thoughts on like when this shift happened, because there's a period where women were like, but I just want my man to like open up to me. And then they do it and they're like, ugh,
Gross.
So on some level, so I'm curious like what you think was the switch. Is it like more new age thinking, especially some of these men's groups I think lead more towards this like new age, like we're one, let's all come together and share our feelings, as opposed to like a much more traditional masculine way of dealing things, which is like, let's talk less and maybe even just release more, in some kind of ritual.
Yeah. I think feminism was the start of it, to be honest. Feminism was the destruction of the family unit, where it started to create the rise of equality. Now, pay equality and things like that, sure, but women are not meant to do what men are supposed to do and vice versa, And so I think that was the start of it, because it was the destruction of the family unit and then women wanting to become men. I saw this guy, his name's Dominic Quattriano or something like that. He's a masculinity coach. And on his page, he was asking for suggestions. And in the comments, one woman said, we need strong women leading men. And his response as a masculinity coach was, those are great suggestions. I'll think about putting those up next time. I'm like, oh, this is the antithesis to what it means to be a man. A man saying that a woman saying that it's okay for strong women to lead men is the antithesis to masculinity. And so where I think it started was the feminist movement. And now I think we're in fourth wave feminism or whatever, or something like that. And it's just become more and more destructive, which now it's leading into the transgender agenda, which is becoming even more destructive. And the attack on masculinity, the attack on the alpha male, the attack on strong masculinity. And so I believe that it was feminism that really started, and that's become more toxic, and the whole narrative of smash the patriarchy. I was actually talking to my partner and I want to get more info, and I'm going to do a post on this. And a woman that she was studying with was saying that the earth wants the blood of the women from their menstruation cycles. And because men have shamed them, men now go to war because they shamed women about their periods. Like as if women not giving their blood to the earth and being shamed about it are responsible for all the fucking wars that men create. Like the stretch in the correlation, like, you know, correlation doesn't equal cause, right? And I was laughing at this when I was listening to this, because I said, talk about trying to find any correlation to blame men on the thing. Like, because women got shamed for their menstrual cycles, which I don't think they should be. It's a beautiful part of the woman's cycle, right? But to say that all wars are created because of this, it's just this massive stretch of feminist bullshit and rhetoric and ideology as an attack on masculinity. So what do? They attack masculinity. Men have to retreat because of that, because they feel that they're toxic and bow down to a feminist ideal. And feminist is destroying women as much as it's destroying men. So I believe, like, the short answer was feminism that really started the attack on masculinity.
Yeah. What's really interesting too is that, you know, this movement to blame men for everything. And when you think about it, every single human that has ever been born on this planet has been born through a woman. You know, so the psychology of the female during the in utero period, the 9 months, and traditionally speaking, most human beings were raised by a woman, you know, for the first few years, that have a huge impact on the development of that child's character. So if some person turns out, let's say, fucked up or having serious issues, like, where's the responsibility of the mother to be like, hey, I played a role in how this individual turned out? And so I think there's not enough. Now, again, we're having a conversation on what it means to be a high value man. And so, of course, as men, we have to take responsibility for the ways that we're not stepping up. And at the same time, it's like there needs to be some awareness of that fact as well, in my opinion. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, totally. That's an excellent point. That's where I was going to go to next, is that women that or boys that are raised by single moms have a host of problems. They're the ones that, like, if the father disappears, now the father should stick around. Don't have a child unless you're going to stick it out. But a woman that's raising a boy, that boy, I think it's a high correlation. And I don't want to say stats without it being in front of me, but from memory, it's around 70 to 80% of the problems with boys that become problem men are because they're raised by single mothers. And I had a woman message me the other day around it. And she goes, yeah, you know, we need women creating strong boys. And I said, no. I said, drop that fucking bullshit narrative. We need strong men being an influence to raise the right boys, not women. Women are the love, the nurturers, the kindness, they sustain, they're soft, they're receptive. It's not their role to create strong men. They're not going to be able to. They're simply not. They'll create imbalanced boys that have distorted views around the way that they see the world. We need strong men stepping up into the father roles. That's our responsibility, the three of us in here as men as well, to send this message out there, to stand up and do the right thing. Because a man needs to raise a boy. A woman is meant to love a boy into nurturance and acceptance, and a man is meant to help mold him to become a man of character and integrity. So it's totally right. The vessel is the female. And so whatever's happening in utero is largely taken on from whatever she's going through at the time too, and subsequently after that when the child's brought into this world.
Yeah. Like, I think one of the biggest signposts that we can look at for the feminization of men, particularly if we're gauging men by the traits of logic, reason, rationality, which obviously anyone is capable of exhibiting these traits, but sure, we can call them masculine traits for now. But just look at the past couple years, how much reason was denied, how much logic was denied, how much rationality was denied, and how many men bent the knee and submitted to a higher, call it male authority figure, be it the government, be it the politicians, be it whatever it might be, and chose to literally deny their own logic despite everything in order to go along, to get along, you know? And even just in that act, in that process of choosing to live in illusion and choosing to, pretend that this charade that masks do anything and that the air's scary and all the rest of it, what are they doing to their own psyche each time they make those choices, right? They're diminishing and chipping away at their own reason. And then what does that do to someone's self-trust, to someone's self-respect, right? Am I actually capable of asserting myself in an appropriate way according to what I actually know as truth?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a really good point. You know, like they say that empires are built on stoicism, which is logic and reasoning, and they fall on Epicureanism, which is pleasure and self-indulgence. And we are witnessing the fall of another empire right now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even call it an empire, because empires are usually seen as something that achieves greatness. And I wouldn't say that what we've lived in has achieved any sort of greatness. There's been some technological innovation, but I see that as more of a foundation for setting up an agenda where we're starting to completely desecrate and destroy the essence of the human being. And you're right, if people can't even think for themselves out of basic elements of survival. I mean, I live up in Mullumbimby, which is kind of like known as the anti-vax capital of the country. And I saw two people walking this morning, their dogs, with two of those plastic masks on. And I'm like, wow, still at this time, people aren't able to get past their own fears and programming and think, hang on a sec, maybe something isn't right here. So they just want to give it away, because people don't like to think for themselves. No. They really don't, because that means they have to be responsible. Mm-hmm. And when they become responsible for themselves, that means everything they've ever done, they have to be accountable for. And good luck when they're suckling on the teat of daddy government and they want to be completely dependent. You're not going to get that kind of behavior where someone goes, right, it's time for me to become powerful and step up. Logically and within reason, assess where I'm at, not even take my power back. You know, we see people say, oh, the government's taking our rights away. It's like, no, you're giving them away. You're giving them away. No one can take your power or your rights away. Only you can give it away. And we give it away to the idea that we don't have power and we don't have rights. And so people, and this is why I'm big on the Stoic philosophy, because it's about logic and reasoning. You make decisions from a reasoned and sober mind, you'll live a good life. If you make all your decisions out of emotional reactivity, you're completely powerless and you're not going to get anywhere.
It's so true, man, because the moment that you make decisions from these places of just whims, you know, or emotional reactivity, then shit, where was it going on with that? Well, I lost my train of thought mid-sentence.
Logic and reasoning versus
there's
reactivity.
Yeah, but the moment, that's right. The moment you do that, you enter into a state of contradiction. You know, how can any of the world make sense from that contradictory state when everything is random, right? When my decision-making process is random, it's not formed by any basis of reason, you know, and the world has to make sense to a human being. And particularly in the study of self-esteem, the world has to make sense. We have to find ourselves worthy and competent of dealing with the challenges of life. But if everything out there is random, if my decision-making process is random, how am I ever going to get to that point, you know?
Yeah, and when it's not cogent or you're not self-aware, and this is part of like what I really do the work on, is our thoughts, which are automated, they're formed in these subconscious programs, right? They're these constructs which exist in the subconscious mind in a form of negation, like I'm not something, I'm not enough, I'm not wanted, you know, I have no power. If we feel like we have no power, we're going to fall into the victim-perpetrator construct, right? So if we're the victim, we're going to need a perpetrator. Then if we don't have someone to be the perpetrator, we'll become the perpetrator to maintain our own sense of victimhood. Yeah. That's where we start to become irrational. It's where we start to become random. We can't think properly, we can't think straight. We're just constantly looking for a way to garner sympathy so we can maintain our own victimization. People love to be a victim because there's a payoff to it. So we have to start unwinding these things that are in our mind and start to understand why we are the way we are. Then we can start to live a life where we can take our own direction and make our own choices, not at the whim of this subconscious programming, which is in us from birth or in utero as well, where we become formed by the pressure of society rather than becoming formed through the pressure of our own tragedies, our own, you know, difficulties, our own challenges that we need to overcome. You know, it's like a diamond is a piece of coal, but for it to become a diamond, it requires a lot of pressure and friction in order to produce the precious stone. Whereas most people, like especially nowadays, like you look at the current state of the modern man, it's like there's barely any pressure you can apply to a man. He's more like an orange. You can squeeze it with one hand, you know, like squeeze an orange juice comes out. You squeeze a human, usually not much good stuff comes out when they're under a lot of pressure. So the ability to handle pressure or the inability to handle pressure creates these erratic, unstable, drunk, drug-taking sort of males that don't really have any foundation in anything solid.
Yeah. You want to go?
I was just going to make the point that like trials and tribulations, they're built into the hero's journey. We all have to meet suffering and deal with suffering and overcome fear on any kind of authentic path, you know? And you're right. That is the way forward. And you started the conversation that way. Purpose is essential. So my question to you is, how does someone cultivate purpose? How does someone find purpose, you know?
Yeah, look, that's a good question. So there's an analytical way to do it. So it's usually right in front of you. So I get people to look at what do they spend most of their time involved in that's actually nourishing. I'm not talking video games and porn and fucking Doritos on the couch watching Netflix. Like, get rid of that and allow something to come forward. So when I was looking at this, I looked at what do I read the most about? And it was about mystical experiences, the nature of consciousness, reality, shamanism, that sort of stuff, right? So I was like, okay, cool. There's this element to me, which is quite deep. Then I looked at, well, what comes naturally to me? I'm a natural born communicator. Speaking in words is my gift. And so I was like, okay, cool. Well, there's that. Then I looked at what do people come to me for? What do they compliment me on? One was how well I can articulate things, but people would always come to me for advice in their relationship, business, money, whatever it was, just as a sounding board. And then I looked at it and I'm like, oh, I'm meant to be a therapist. And it was that simple. It was just a moment of clarity that I looked at. But then that's one part. So I found the broad stroke. But then I looked at what's the hardest task that I can take on. This is a bit more of the esoteric part where I was sitting on the end of my bed and I literally heard a voice just tell me that I was here to help dissolve sexual trauma. And I was like, okay. Then I started looking up courses. There's no courses on it. Like basically in traditional therapy, they say that it can't be done. You're not supposed to address the sexual trauma in and of itself. This was a few years ago. I heard this anyway. It might have changed these days. And you're not supposed to go back into it because it can re-traumatize someone. So it's almost for sexual trauma victims, it's like it's a no-go zone, right? Now, I was never sexually traumatized. So I thought this was a bit of a strange journey for me because I'd never been pulled towards it. I'd never understood it. But that was my big task. And so I said, all right, well, if no one's done it yet, then I'll go figure out how to do it. So that was my impossible task. And it's like this, men need like this Herculean task where he had the 12 tasks, you know, and I posted that with him wrestling the Nemean lion the other day whose coat couldn't be pierced by any arrows. And so he had to go and kill the Nemean lion and skin him and take his skin. And that's where you see the sculpture where he's got the lion's head and the paws tied up across his chest. And as men, we need the task. So we need to figure out what industry we want to be in and then how we're going to innovate to change that. And those two things are really important. Take on the biggest task you can possibly think of taking on. That might be just leading your family. You know, it might be just being a coach to Boy Scouts. I don't even know if that shit's still around, but if it is, go do that. But, you know, it might be starting a podcast like you guys are doing where you're in the face of ridicule. You'll be like, no, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It doesn't need to be Elon Musk style, change the world kind of stuff. But change yourself, you'll change the world around you anyway. So list those things, find what you're most interested in, and then find the hardest task possible and go after it. That's how I help men with purpose.
What do you think? You brought up Herculean tasks. Like there used to be this initiation from boyhood to manhood that I think is missing from society. And so, like, what's your recommendation to fathers with young boys on how to support them in that process? Like, you know, I feel like back in the days they throw you in the forest and it's like, yeah, here's a knife, figure it out. Whereas now it's like, don't take me away from my video game. Like,
Yeah. So there's three types of cultures that tribes used to be split into. So there was the farmer culture, which they'd learn to grow food. There was the hunter culture, so they'd go learn to hunt. And there's the warrior culture, they were the fighters, right? So pick whichever one you are. Now, people think, oh, farmers, that's a bit soft, but the strength that it took to become a farmer back in the day, like that's why they call it, this guy's got farm boy strength. And those dudes will fucking crush watermelons with their hands. Like they're the strongest out of the three. The warriors are the most vicious and the hunters are usually the most cunning, right? So I would look at one of those three. For me, it was martial arts. Like I've done martial arts for years now. I love it. I love to fight. I enjoy violence. I love like hitting myself against another man. You know, like Fight Club, he goes, you don't know yourself till you fought someone, right? Men, we need that primal masculine instinct to come out. So I would say to a father, take your son hunting if that's what you like. Teach him to grow food and develop strength through lifting weights or whatever, or teach him martial arts in Brazilian jiu-jitsu or whatever one that, you know, resonates. Those are the three things. Like in the Spartan culture, 7-year-old boys would be taken from their mothers, cast out into society in order to survive. Fucking 7 years old, man. 7 years old, and they're out and they have to go survive on their own. 7-year-olds nowadays, like they're probably vaping and like, you know, calling their mum by their first name, asking for gender reassignment surgery. Like, what the fuck? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what I'd look at one of those three for sure as a father to a son.
You said something before, and I just made me think of that Mike Tyson quote. What it was like, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. I don't know why. It just made me think of that.
There's a good one. I wrote this the other day, which is mortal danger crushes fixed ideas. So it's like if you're putting yourself in a difficult position, all your fixed ideas and concepts just go out the window.
Yeah, and as a man, it's like you have to have the resilience to deal with what gets thrown at you in life. You know, whether you're a farmer, whether you're a hunter, whether you're a warrior, you know, can you stand in the face of whatever gets thrown at you? Stay solid, like you said. The stoicism is rooted in that, and handle your business. So I dig that. I like the triumvirate. Excuse me. Anyways, gotta put that on forward.
It's God calling, bro.
Yeah.
Hello? Which one am I? Hunter?
Yes,
farmer,
Mr. President.
or warrior?
Yeah, yes, Mr. President. I'll call you back.
Yes, Biden.
Yeah.
It's so true, man, because you know, and this is so many signposts and synchronicities for me at the moment, and for Yerasimos as well, being called to engage in some kind of martial arts or get into some kind of primal activity and some kind of form of, controlled anger release as well. But when you're up against fighting someone, like someone's coming at you, gonna fucking knock your head off, it's gonna trigger everything in your nervous system. What's gonna come up is, fuck, what am I gonna do in this situation? And I'll give you a personal example. Last year, I was getting sushi, and across the road, there was this fucking ice junkie male trying to literally beat his girl or his partner or whatever it was, and people were just standing there watching it, and I couldn't, man. And I was like, "What are you doing? What the hell is going on?" Stood like don't hit her, just run her into the road. And then this guy, he stopped looking at her. His eyes gazed to me, fixated on me. He crossed the road. I'm like, oh shit, here we go. What have I gotten myself into? I backed into the sushi shop thinking he's not going to come in here. Dude, he just walked straight into the sushi shop, just fucking black eyes, punched me square in the head, and then left, right? And then afterwards, I was like, Joel, man, you didn't even get a hand up. You didn't even fucking defend yourself on any level whatsoever. You were still trying to passively appease him, even from the moment he got close to you. I'll be honest with you, man, that built some resentment within me against myself. It started this questioning process as well. So yeah, I'm curious to explore that a bit more, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's just really important to know if stuff goes down, then you can handle yourself. It doesn't mean that you need to in every situation. Now, an ice junkie or something like that, like this is why I love grappling, because it's, if I saw an ice junkie doing that, I probably wouldn't get involved in it unless they were coming towards me. Like the one thing jiu-jitsu taught me was how not to fight, right? As in like my coach said to me once, he goes, the best self-defense is to not be there. And so that's an important one. Now, once you get into it, you know that you can handle it, and we can do those things where we need to protect women and stuff like that. But I'm always of the volition, if someone's coming at me, I just attack first. If someone was coming at me aggressively, I just go first. But this is the part, and one of these noble things that we hear is like, I'd throw myself in front of the bus for my kids, or I'd die for them. I'm like, well, actually, biologically, you'd probably freeze because you'd go into a complete shutdown state because you'd be in shock. You wouldn't be able to do shit unless you've actually been in those situations where you know what to do. It's going to be very difficult. And the thing with an ice junkie, Joel, you could have probably been a really good boxer, and if he didn't have knockout power, he probably wouldn't have felt it. Like you could break an ice junkie's arm, he won't go for it. So at that point, you've got to look at something like strangling him, where you cut the blood off to his brain. And I posted this with a photo of jiu-jitsu, because that's called the lion killer. When you strangle someone, that's what Hercules did, right? He strangled the lion. And that's a really important tool to master, because if you can even train jiu-jitsu to get your blue belt, you pretty much be able to beat most guys on the street that can't fight in a close quarter confrontation. And so in that, if he came over and punched you, like if he was coming towards me, I would have just wrestled him to the ground and strangled him. But it gives you that motivation to go, wow, I never want to be in that position ever again.
That's right.
And that's a good reason to go and do it. And hopefully you never have to use it. I hope I never have to use it ever again. And I hope I never get into another street fight. But if I have to, at least I know I can handle myself.
Yeah. I think what Joel, you referred earlier about where I'm at right now is that, I played a lot of sports. I wrestled when I was younger. And I just feel like currently in my life, I've moved away from that, and it's showing up. It's showing up even just how I feel and even in my psyche energetically. And so it's like perfect timing that we're having this conversation. And then our last guest was a Qigong master and actually referred a place about 20, 30 minutes away from me that goes Muay Thai, boxing, and jiu-jitsu. And so I'm feeling called to just get that energy moving and to be in that aggression, because I know there are big aggressive parts of me that aren't being fed. There are even competitive parts of me in this place that just want to just experience the energy and the blood flowing through me in a certain way that just feels stagnant right now. And anyways, that's just where I'm at right now. And I'm happy that we're talking about this.
Yeah, I think it's definitely good to go and do it. Like I've done Muay Thai and boxing, and I did those for a number of years. But when I found jiu-jitsu, that was really the thing that pulled me into it, because it is so difficult. It's so hard on the body. It's so complex. It's called human chess. So you can't really ever master it. There's a guy in Turkey that did a PhD study on it. I don't know if this is still relevant, but he said to learn every transition to muscle memory. So every transition, every move, to master it where it's all subconscious, you'd have to train 3 times a day for over 600 years. Because it's so complex. So you'd never actually be able to master it. And to speak to your point where you move away from that, I did over the last couple of years because I had a bucket handle tear in my meniscus, so I couldn't train jiu-jitsu. And I found what I did is I became a little bit more irrational internally, and I started to lean back on my words as my weapons to dominate in that way rather than get that energy out into a physical perspective. And it was like I kind of bought into like, I'm a healer and, it's all peace and love and acceptance. I don't want to hurt anyone. It's like, no, I fucking love strangling other dudes if I'm in a hard fight. I fucking love it. It gets it out of me. And I found that over the last 2 years, situations would come up that normally wouldn't even fall in my periphery, but they were affecting me because I didn't have that outlet to be able to go and, me and another guy go, all right, let's do this for 5 minutes and go at 100% and see who wins, So it's super important, and you don't really know the deficit it creates until the deficit is there.
Yeah, without a doubt. I notice it too. Like there's like an extra buzziness and me wanting to use my language in a different way and words and humor and, spending more time on devices, obviously, for work, we have the podcast, we have our coaching. It's like, okay, where do we find the balance? Because technology's here. We utilize it to do our work. And yet at the same time, I'm surrounded by nature and there's this opportunity to connect to it in a deeper way. So the timing's perfect and I'm ready to go. Plus, I find that old patterns start coming up and start feeding them in a way because I don't think I'm moving that energy, some of that kind of primal energy. So we'll see how it unfolds.
Even just from a Jungian psychology standpoint, shadow integration, like how much aggression and anger is repressed just growing up. We're taught to be submissive in the face of this moral code that's just given to us. Oh, you can't react like that. You can't express yourself that way. And I think everyone carries this repression. So I think this is important for everyone, not just men and women, to be able to deal and feel their anger in some kind of way.
What's life force energy? That's like such a powerful life force energy. People shun and judge anger, and yet to be able to tap into it in a healthy way, in a measured way. I mean, I think people who struggle with low energy and certain chronic conditions, depression, there's just a disconnection from that life force.
Yeah, there totally is. And that's a really good point that you made there, because we look at also in our narrative as well. It's like men that get angry are toxic, but women that express rage are divine feminine. You know what I mean? Like it's absurd. I did a post about this and I said, it's interesting to note that when men get angry, it's toxic masculinity, but when women express rage, it's I'm a divine goddess, and you're meant to hold the space. And one woman wrote on there, she goes, every narcissistic man on the planet will love this. And I said, yeah, and every angry feminist will hate it, because that's the narrative of it, right? It's just the emotion that comes out is not being expressed in the right way. And as you said, Joel, it's Jungian psychology. When the shadow is integrated, it becomes the golden shadow. And it's like I'd sort of moved away from enjoying the fight. I love to fight, not in the street, not hurt someone, but against another trained opponent where I can test myself. I fucking love it because I find myself in it. I find my bullshit. I find my excuses. I find my edge. I find I want to give up. When I get dominated by a good black belt or a good brown belt in jiu-jitsu, I feel like pathetic, right? And so that makes me, iron sharpens iron, as they say. And that makes me want to get better. It makes me find my edge. And then I get that primal masculinity out of me. And I just become a calmer, confident, safer human being for everyone around me.
Oh, yeah, bro. Yeah, absolutely, man. Dude, can you speak of I feel like there's this extreme new age version of the polarity teachings going on at the moment, particularly where the man just has to be the mountain and has to bear anything that comes from the woman. And no matter how many waves come and crash at him, can you speak on that if you don't mind?
Yeah, I posted about this the other day and I saw a post that said, test him 1,000 times and then test him 1,000 times more. And I just looked at this. I went, that's fucking abuse. That's abuse. And that is if you think about that 1,000 times and 1,000 times more, your woman's testing you once a day for 6 fucking years. 6 years every day. If my woman was testing me every day for 6 years, I'd be like, no, if she did it for 6 days, I'd be like, get out of here. No, why are you doing this? This is this feminine chaos and rage that is I'm the storm and you're the mountain. It's no, you're meant to ride the waves of the emotionality of women. They go through their cycles and every week is different, right? So they have their cycle and then they have the week after and then 2 weeks, 3 weeks and 4 weeks. If you can maintain a sense of stoicism and calm throughout that, great. But it doesn't mean that we're meant to be the subject of abuse, because what will happen and what's in the polarity teachings is I'm going to test you, I'm going to test you, I'm going to test you until you can't take it anymore. Then I can blame you. So I can jump to another guy and say, you're a boy that didn't do his shit and weren't strong enough to handle my chaos and handle my storm. It's no, that's called domestic violence. That's called coercive control. That's called abuse and manipulation. And that's not fucking cool by any stretch of the imagination. And then to dump it back on the man and say, oh, well, he hadn't done enough work. He couldn't handle all of me. That other narrative of handle all of me. It's what are you talking about? Why don't you just take responsibility, step into your femininity, which is actually more of the aspect of surrender and receptivity and openness, so the man can lead, rather than trying to crush your man's spirit so you can be right about the fact that you're crazy. It's too extreme and it needs to come back to balance. It's becoming this thing where
everything requires rationality. It's not just a masculine thing. Everything needs to be rational.
Totally. It's if we're getting women, there's that hot crazy matrix that they talk about where it's you want a woman to be about an 8 out of 10 hot, but a 5 out of 10 crazy. But the crazier they are and the hotter they are, it's that's the danger zone. And then low level crazy with high level hot, that's the unicorn that doesn't exist, right? So it's...
Sorry, guys, little technical difficulties there. Apparently, Joe Biden cut out Yerasimos' internet after he ignored his phone call earlier.
Shut him down.
Yeah. You were telling us about the hot crazy. You were telling us about the hot crazy.
The hot crazy matrix.
Yeah.
So there's this thing out there which is a bit amusing, which is if you get a 10 out of 10 hotness with a less than 5 out of 10 craziness, you've got a unicorn that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, if you've got a 5 out of 10 hotness but an 8 out of 10 crazy, that's a death sentence for a man, and vice versa. So it's pretty funny, but this sort of the more feminine I think a woman is you're going to take on the chaos, the, bonkers, their words don't match their actions. These are typically the sort of women that I've dated that I like because I'm very masculine. And so the more masculine you are, the more feminine you're going to attract in. But we were talking about balance, I think, where it came out, where we need to bring things back to balance. And that can be done through rationality and logic. But it's also, and I did a post on this, it's this ridiculous goddess queen culture that's out there that is just this immature, dark feminine, which is just wrapped up in this goddess culture. It's oh, I'm such a goddess and I'm a queen. And it's you're living at home with your parents. What are you talking about? That sort of stuff needs to really be examined and not really taken on as this culture where this immature brat behavior is wrapped up as feminine chaos and rage, you know?
Yeah.
And we see that in all of this, all of these teachings that are out there where it's like, oh, he's not man enough to handle me. It's like, no, like you're taking away from his life. Like you're diminishing his life. You're not adding to it. By acting like that in the crazy, smashing plates, throwing shit at people. And I was working with a guy and he's like, yeah, my partner threw a glass in my head on the weekend. I was like, that's domestic violence. Like, that's not cool to put up with that kind of stuff. Like, if she wants to yell and rage and whatever, cool. But when it starts to get physical, yeah, I mean, if I threw an object at my partner, like, I'd be arrested. You know, I'd never do that. But like the other way, it seemed like, oh, she's just crazy. So it's got to be this coming back to this balance of owning those parts, working through it, understanding it, and addressing where that's coming from. Because most of the time that comes from daddy issues. The woman won't have a good relationship with her father if she acts like that. And so we have to be bringing things back into harmony, into balance. The man is stable, stoic, grounded, present. She can start to unravel that and move through that as stepping forward into commitment to be a healthy feminine being, not just giving them carte blanche to be however fucking crazy and nonsensical they want to be ad nauseum and ad infinitum for however long they want to be, and then blame the man for not being able to step up.
Yeah. And you have to value yourself as an individual within relationships, you know, because, and ultimately in valuing yourself as an individual and cultivating real self-love, you're going to have boundaries. You're going to have firm boundaries no matter who it is, to not deal with abuse on any level. You know what I mean? And the other person's going to feel that.
No man of self-esteem is going to allow themselves to be tested 1,000 times and another 1,000 times and then one more time. You know, it's not going to happen.
No, they won't. You get sick of that behavior and it'd just be really tiring, you know? And I think any relationship is meant to have healthy boundaries where it's like, you know, I'm not cool with this. This is not what I want. Like, I'm not going to do this. I'll give you an opportunity to step up, to go with me. If that's not what you want, then that's cool too. You know, I've had those conversations in relationships before where, you know, I'm like, look, this is what I want. If you're not there, then let's call it. That's okay. We'll move on. So I think that's important, especially as a man, that's you leading the relationship too.
Yeah, but people are afraid to speak up for themselves because of the perceived cost, right?
Yeah. What's the cost of not speaking up? You know, it's always a greater cost of not speaking up. I was working I wasn't working with them. A guy rang me the other day and he wanted me to help him resolve a really bad ringing that's in his head. And we were talking about pricing and he's like, oh, you know, like, can you do any cheaper? And because it's, you know, the cost is pretty expensive. And I said, well, what's the cost of not doing it? You know, and it's like, it's that kind of mentality. It's like, what's the cost of not doing something versus the cost of doing it? You know, and there's always value versus cost, always. And the cost is always going to be detrimental to your value if you're compromising.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. But the thing is, our culture is built on compromise. Our culture, for the most part, is built on altruism, right? And this is very much so linked to the kind of unconscious reseeding of communism within our society as well. We're no longer in a place where we expect to give value to receive value anymore either. You know what I mean? Of course.
You just demand value.
Yeah, that's right. And we expect value, you know, and we expect that things should just be done at a compromise. But what's that doing to relationships? It's creating resentment. It's creating obligation. No one likes practicing it. No one likes doing it, you know, but or it's just embedded in the culture on some level.
Yeah. And, you know, this is like a big one with like polyamory and open relationships, right? Is that the woman will usually be the one that wants to call a polyamorous open relationship. But that's just a way for the beta male or the weak submissive male to try to maintain some sort of value because he thinks that his woman is more valuable. And this is part of like the sexual liberation culture, the hookup culture. I call it kindergarten because it's like a bunch of kids running around looking for like validation through cheap means by doing that. And I'm not a fan of that stuff and I speak pretty openly about it. But it's this compromising of values where it's like, nah, like as a man, I'm not going to fucking let my woman go out and fuck other dudes. Are you serious? Like, if that's what you want to do, see you later. Like, get out of here. I'm not going to put up with that stuff. But because it's in the environment now, you know, more and more women are calling that under the guise of sexual liberation, which is I demand this. And we're looking at like everywhere in our culture now as well, especially in the hard left, right? They just demand that things be their way without offering any value whatsoever. You know, you will do things the way that I want to do them just because I say so. And if you don't, I'm going to complain about it because I'll get offended. And the fact that it's out there, like at the moment with this gender narrative that's going on, how offended people get, it's a tiny minority which are creating like this ripple out into this behavior, which I'm looking at it going, I can't believe this. Like 7-year-olds allowed to take puberty blockers, young girls and boys being allowed to choose whether they want gender reassignment surgery without their parents' consent. You cannot make a decision at 7 years old at that kind of level. You know, I was talking to my partner. She knows the guy that they're letting their kid choose their own gender. He's fucking 3.
Bro, kids are being raised as non-binary for them to choose their gender when they're of age to choose it. Like, what the fuck is this doing to someone's psyche?
Well,
It's ridiculous.
There's the phrase with babies, they're called theybies now, you know, like, so you're not putting the gender on the child. Like, oh, they'll decide their gender when they grow up.
Yeah. It's sick. It's a mental distortion.
We're going to see so many lawsuits in the future from older kids that when they finally maybe get some sense and they go, I can't believe my parents allowed me to do this, you know, or it's just insane to me. The child's psyche is not developed to a point to make these kinds of decisions that are permanent.
Yeah. And I mean,
it
goes back to the destruction of reasons, you know?
Yeah.
We're just denying the facts of reality. Okay. So now no one can understand reality. No one can comprehend everything. So just seeding the ground for more and more irrationality, which is going to lead to all sorts of other bullshit.
Yeah.
Well, we look at, teachers along the way are able to suggest medicating a child based on ADD, behavioral disorders and things like that. So teachers are starting to form the parental role towards students now. And I saw a post the other day where I can't remember what they're called. I think they're called binders or something, which girls wear around their breast tissue to flatten them out so they don't appear as girls. And teachers are starting to distribute them in school and encourage that. And it's like, when did the state become the parent? Because that's what it's really been moving towards. Like, the state raises the child. That's the agenda. Yeah. But if we look at that, it's like, if like I'm a 7 or 8 year old kid, I was a big skateboarder when I was a kid. So I hung out with other skateboarders. So if I'm like a 7 or 8 year old that's seeking belonging and connection, and all my male mates are now going, oh yeah, I'm going to take puberty blockers and I want to be a little girl. Fuck, well, I want to fit in. So maybe I'll just do that without knowing the catastrophic cost to my own mental, psychological, emotional, spiritual, sexual, physical health later on down the track, just because I want to fit into a narrative which is completely poisoning the minds of children and society alike. It's madness.
Yeah. And then you have parents who want to be seen a certain way or go along with a progressive agenda, and so they're not gonna say anything either, because they have their communities and their social groups that they also don't want to be looked down upon when someone's bringing this up in a conversation. And how dare they stand up and speak their truth because someone's gonna be like, oh, I'm transphobic, or I'm some Trump supporter, or whatever the case may be. Like, it's pretty wild. It's happening on every single level. And then on top of it, you have the media and you have Hollywood that's pushing this as well. So if you don't have psychic immunity as a parent, how are you going to instill that in your child?
Yeah, well, irrationality breeds irrationality, right? And I'm sorry to say this, but in 2022, sending your kid to be raised by the state for 5-6 hours a day is irrational in the current society we live in.
Yeah, totally, man. It's just because it comes down to indoctrination. And they're just going to indoctor these new ideas, these new philosophies to destroy and invert the human essence at its natural state. The natural state is everything operates in a dualistic fashion, right? It's duality. Light requires dark to exist. I'm not a big fan of right and wrong, but, left and right, male, female, masculine, feminine, cold needs heat. We all need one thing as the opposite to understand it. To try to bring it back to the fact that there's no gender. And I mean, look what's happening in swimming competitions, creepy men identifying as women that are 35-year-old men taking on 8-year-old girls that are wrestling, like, because they identify as a fucking 8-year-old, or walking into public bathrooms and, going to the toilet next to a little girl. Like, it's fucked. And it's like, there's no other way that we can look at it. I'm a pretty articulate and well-measured man in the way that I use words, but it's fucked. And it's creating a corrupted society, and this virus is spreading very quickly. This is a real virus. This is a mind virus. This is a psychological virus. not one that's, COVID or whatever. But for a grown man that could be a sexual predator to be able to walk into a little girl's bathroom, expose his genitals and look at her at the same time is atrocious, and it shouldn't be allowed.
Fuck no, bro. And you know what, to me, it's reflective of this whole movement towards neutrality. It's also a movement towards moral neutrality. They don't want anyone empowered to make any decision. And to me, there is right and wrong. There is moral and immoral. But they want everyone in this moral grayness where we don't understand or comprehend the facts of life, the facts of reality. We can't trust our own minds to know what's right or what's wrong anymore. It's all just distorted and all over the place.
Wasn't it the recent U.S. nominee to the Supreme Court? They asked her to define a woman, and she was like, "Oh, I'm not a biologist."
Couldn't. Yeah. Madness. Absolute madness. It's like you got female anatomy, you're a woman.
Yeah.
They did that in Australia too, where one of the guys was asking, and he goes, "Well, it's a hot topic, and I don't really want to get into it because there's many definitions of what a woman is."
Yeah, it's like, what's yours? Speak your truth. Everyone's walking in eggshells. No one wants to stake their flag in the ground about anything for fear of retribution, fear of being canceled, fear of losing their platform. It's really sickening.
Let's correct it. Jaguar, what is a woman?
It's a woman that is born with female anatomy. It is a being that has the anatomy of a vagina and a reproductive process where they can give birth to children. Is it XY chromosome? I can't remember. Is it XY or Y chromosome? Whatever that is. It's like, that's it.
Sure, the left has an argument against that, I'm sure.
Yeah. There's a trans flag now on the emoji thing on iPhone. Have you seen it?
No.
If you type in trans, there's the new trans flag. Yeah. There's one
it's
on
pretty
there.
wild.
So.
I've shared this story in, I think, private. I don't know if I've said it publicly, but my wife and I were in a trauma training course, somatic experiencing, and we were talking about working with the viscera, and it was on Zoom because of the shit show that was going on last year. And one participant was like, "Hey, so what happens when I'm working with a pregnant woman?" And of course, me knowing the environment I was in, I looked straight to the chat because I was waiting, and someone comes in. Can we please use gender neutral language and call it a birthing person? And then other people chimed in. It became this whole thing, dude. It's just what? Again, where are the feminists? Where are the feminists here? Where women are being erased? You can't say mother. You have to say birthing person. You can't say breastfeeding. You have to say chest feeding. I mean, it is irrational, And then people think, oh yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Natural. This is a natural evolution and progress in the last 5, 10, 15 years where we've just lost our minds, and that oh yeah, this is normal.
Yeah. The next thing is going to be the child lovers movement as well, where pedophilia is going to be normalized as a sexual proclivity. Yeah.
It's already happening.
Yeah.
People want to add the P to the LGBTQ plus and all the other letters. It's there's a movement for that.
Yeah.
There's speeches at conferences, at academic conferences where people are sliding this in. But again, it's wild for anyone that has seen the 1984 interview with Yuri Bezmenov and G. Edward Griffin talking about ideological subversion, the movement through the institutions.
Yeah.
This has been the plan for decades, and we're seeing it happening, but we're seeing it really come to fruition, like you said. And however, the last 5, 10 years, I feel like it's just on steroids.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
But anyways, you know what, man? There's a massive splitting of society. There's no doubt about it. It's a train wreck that's still going, but many people have left the train and are still leaving the train. So I think seeds, even though that is moving in that direction, seeds are being planted firmer and deeper into the ground on the other side as well, so to speak. And the more it goes along, the more people are like, "What the fuck? This train is completely out of control." So it's almost like there's this portion of reality that's just going down this incredibly dystopian timeline, and there's other people just standing there outside the theater, just watching it. Like, what the fuck is happening there? What is this shit show?
Yeah.
The film is still rolling.
Yeah. I heard someone say, I can't remember who it was. It was a really good analogy where it's like, there are some people are still in the movie, but most people have walked out. So some brilliant dude said that. I can't remember. But
coming to an Instagram post nearest you.
Yeah. Maybe I'll write that. It just seems to come out of nowhere. Maybe I heard it somewhere else. I don't know.
Hey, man,
that was credit to Joel for that one.
I reckon that guy must be incredibly good looking as well.
Yeah. Real smart, good looking, real modern man.
I love it.
And I think that just to speak to that, it's important in this day and age that strong men speak the truth. A strong man is not always a nice man. A strong man is a kind man, but he'll say what people need to hear, not what they want to hear. And I come up against this, a fair bit. My posts can be controversial sometimes. I can be pretty direct in it. I don't care if people don't like, well, if they don't like it or if they get upset by it. If you get upset by it, good, explore that. I want you to get upset by it. I want you to start to look at it, and I'm going to start putting things in your face for you to see about the corruption of the social conditioning of which we have a responsibility as strong men. It's like the saying that good times create weak men create hard times create strong men create good times. We're in the hard times create strong men phase at the moment. That's why there's the attack on masculinity. One of the big things that men need to do is stand in truth regardless of attack or vitriol, to go against the crowd. It's like that famous photo of the dude standing in front of the tank, and there's the tanks behind him and it's one guy. And if that's, there's the three of us, and we're on that path to speak the truth, to put this out there and say enough bullshit. Like, I don't care if I offend you. Great. Like, I saw an Aussie comedian, he goes, okay, you offended me. Now what?
Yeah.
Now what? Like, what happens now? Okay, cool. I offended you. Great. Now what do we do about it? Like, it's just like, if you're offended, you need to look at yourself. Whereas if I'm offending you, I can't actually offend you. All I'm doing is revealing some sort of limitation that you've got that's already there. So you need to look at yourself.
Yeah.
And strong men have the responsibility to do what's right.
I like that you brought up social media as well, man, because if people like it or not, it is a weapon these days. Your voice is a weapon, and it is a tool for you to share your consciousness and share your individual expression. And for me, that's the reason I use social media, is to share my voice, to share my individuality. But there's so many people out there just pandering to their audience, pandering to their followers. But it's completely reversed, in my opinion. If I was to tailor every single thing that I said for my audience, then I would mold myself to the collective. I would be losing my individuality. I'll be losing my individual expression. And now more than ever, in this, I guess, there's this new birthing. People want to work with like-minded people. People want to work with people that are in integrity with them on all aspects of reality, that understand things the way that they understand things, that aren't shying away from certain topics and aren't living in this fucking illusory PC culture that's been built around us, And I think part of taking back our voice is people need to, on some level, develop the courage and the strength and the individuality and the self-esteem to speak their truth and understand that, okay, sure, some people are going to be offended, but that doesn't take anything away from me, because the more you use your voice, the more you speak in authenticity, you're signaling to the world your intentions, your wants, your desires, your vision, your future, your goals, your reality, But if I'm constantly curtailing that and curbing my words based on some kind of collective mindset, then I'm basically saying that I'm not ready for it. I'm not ready to go there.
And that comes back to what we said at the start, which is what's possible versus what's not possible anymore, What's not possible is to continue with the charade of pretend, and authenticity can only come forward from that. And energetically, you step into the place of courage and authenticity and acceptance. Like, if I accept myself for who I am, great. Then no one can't accept me because I accept me. So if you don't like me, I don't care. That's on you, not on me. And that's a really important part. Social media is a weapon. Our voices become tools, and we have influence. We've got followings, so people follow it. I get a lot of support these days. I don't really get people that are off me or anything like that, which sometimes disappoints me, because I do like a little bit of a good spirited debate with people when I'm trying to change a viewpoint. But, once we start to stand in truth and we speak that, then we're in integrity. And when we're in integrity comes from the word integer, which comes from the word entire, which means wholeness. When we're out of integrity, the opposite of an integer, which is a whole number, is a fraction. We become fractured to ourselves when we're not in integrity. And so integrity is really important for a man, in my opinion.
Absolutely, man. And I find the same. I don't get too much backlash at all. And like, my posts can be very triggering, obviously, to some people. But I think this is the other point of it, because you set your boundaries in the way that you use your voice and the way you speak your truth and with the integrity that you speak, And people know where you're from. People know how grounded you are, how centered you are, how willing you are to defend your values. And so not everyone is going to be like, all right, fucking let's have a go, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the algorithm plays a role a little bit in that, where your stuff's being shown to people that are more aligned. But even then, I think people know, they can feel your intention, they can feel your power, they can feel the reasoning and rationality, and they're just like, okay, today's not the day to troll. That's what I find.
Yeah.
All right. It's great to have you back on, man.
Yeah, dude.
It's good to be on, man. I've really enjoyed it, man. Like, I'm like, why haven't I done this sooner? You know, like you guys, we had such a good flow, man. You know, we're all in such like synchronicity and synergistically aligned that it's like, it's fun, man. It's nice and loose. And it's good to see like how much can change in a year too.
Yeah. That's what I was just thinking. It's like seeing here and seeing both of you here is a reference point to go back to where we were and what we were creating and what our vision was. And it's kind of cool, man. And even as a man, we're having this conversation about being a high value man. And it's like who I was as a man 10, 11 months ago, whenever that was, and who I am now, and how I feel in my skin, and how grounded I feel, how much more confident I feel for creating, putting forth productive effort, getting feedback from my environment. Like, it's just, I feel so much more grounded and solid. I feel more confident, man. I feel like I can fucking slay dragons, dude. Like, people like present an opportunity to me, and like 3-4 years ago, I'd be like, I don't know, can I do it? Am I able to do it? And now I'm just like, yeah, cool. Yeah, that resonates. Let's do it. Boom.
Yeah, that's really important. Hey, it's like, you know, I got interviewed by Vogue recently, or a pre-interview for Vogue or something like that. I've got a couple of interviews coming up with, you know, 500,000 readership or listenership or whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, cool, whatever. I like don't even take it on anymore. Whereas like, you know, a year or two ago, I'd be like, yeah, like I'm doing this and I'm telling everyone about it. Now I'm like, oh yeah, okay, whatever.
Dude,
cool.
I remember some years back where it was the first time someone asked me to come on, like it was a Facebook Live to talk about like body work and trauma. Bro, I was like fucking sweating bullets, man. I was like, I set up the camera. I was like, oh my God, I got to put books on it. It's got to be a certain angle. Everything's got to be fine. Now someone hits me up. It's like, yo, you want to come on a podcast? Okay, cool. Like, oh, it's going to be on in 10 minutes. Right, let me sit down. Great. Let's have a conversation. It's just funny.
Yeah. You just naturally fall into it. You know, people like, I'll do workshops now and I'll be a guest speaker, whatever. And they're like, what's the workshop on? I'm like, oh, I don't actually know what's it on. Oh, okay. Like healing the father wound. Cool. Yeah. I'll just sit down and wing it. You know, it'll be like on my phone, like going, yeah, so blah, 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 and like a 1 hour workshop or something, you know? Whereas like you know, I'm like, right, I've got all these notes like around my screen, like whiteboards, chalkboards, pie graphs, charts, everything. And it's like, now I just go, oh, yeah, whatever. Like I didn't know we were going to talk about this today. I was just like, yeah, whatever we talk about, we'll talk about. Cool, let's go.
I love it. I love it, man. It's so cool.
It's great,
it's
bro.
awesome.
And I mean, because particularly that first episode, that was pretty much the start of also like a bit of an entrepreneurial journey for Yerasimos and I as well, you know? And I remember at the time, one of the things you said to me, because back then I was purely working one-on-one with clients. I was doing just my divination readings, etc. You asked me what my price was and I told you, and you go, bro, you need to at least double, triple that, you know? And at the time, like all this fear within me, you know, my value, my worth, etc., etc., etc. But it's incredible just to think back and have these direct signposts of change and progress along the way, you know. And I think everyone needs that feeling, bro. Everyone needs to feel like they've moved from A to B and they've walked some kind of path and they're taking some kind of journey of ascent, you know. And I think if more people had that, that would actually cure a lot of the issues that we're talking about, because all these different dysfunctions, they arise out of external and needing to externalize validation, you know. But when you've walked a productive path, when you've conquered a dragon, when you've slayed a challenge, whatever it might be, you have that validation. You develop this authentic sense of self-esteem. And you're no longer needing out there to go and blabber and be irrational and create all this drama in the ways that we've been talking about.
Yeah, it's a good point. You know, like when that's starting to sort of integrate the ego, you know, the wounded ego, or the, you know, the need for validation or acceptance or whatever, you know, and it just moves through a path and you get to a point where it's like, yeah, cool. Like, what am I actually aligned with? What do I want to put out into the world? You know, I don't need to be posting about all the articles I do, or, you know, who wants to interview me or anything like that. That doesn't do anything for me anymore. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's important as you conquer those parts of yourself, they actually dissolve, and then the real authentic you starts to come out, where it's like, okay, what am I really about? You know, what's the truth of my heart matched with my reasoning logic around how I want to present myself in the world, not a way that I can get women around me or drive fast cars or all this other nonsense that we think is going to make us happy. Rather, it's about speaking the truth of who we really are.
100%.
Absolutely, man. And like, we've worked with a fair few people now, obviously. And the one thing like that people want more than anything else, right? They want to be valued for their authenticity. They want to create meaningful careers based on being themselves, based on giving their gift, you know? And I think this truly is, this is vocational, right? That we're talking about. To me, this is on some level the highest ideal. And it's more possible now than ever before in this information age, you know? There's so many people who are so eager and willing to learn. But there's these money blockages as well, right? Oh, wait, I'm going to receive value. Am I worthy of receiving value for giving my gift? What, for me, for who I am? You know, that kind of thing.
Because you're offering yourself as a service, so you'll define yourself based on the money that comes in. Like my partner, she's charging a certain amount, and I'm like, fucking same to you. I said, double it. Come on, like you're just not valuing yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and so when this guy the other day asked me to discount it, I just go, whenever someone asks me for a discount, it usually isn't a very enjoyable process because they're defined by some sort of guarantee, which means they don't value themselves. And if they don't value themselves to find the money, they're not going to value anything else outside of that because they haven't been able to find it. And it was funny because I said no to the guy, and then I had another introduction call with another guy, and I told him my rates, and he goes, oh, I just don't have the money for that. I said, trust that you'll find it. Within 2 hours, he goes, I need your bank details. I've got your money. And I'm like, see, you valued yourself, right? So that's how it works. Money is tied in with value. Value is around self-love. Your value is inherent. You can't argue that. When someone has an absence of self-value, they're going to define themselves by what they think they're worth, which is a piece of plastic that someone's giving that to them, which might be $70 an hour, $80 an hour. I'm like, if you value yourself, you will find the market that will pay you what you think you're worth, right? And you've got to take time to build that up and stuff like that and whatever. But people like to pay they like to pay a lot. That's what people don't get. Like they like to pay a lot for someone. They're like, yeah, this guy values himself. They're going to get the result. And if you've got the results, you'll charge accordingly, right? And that's all out of self-value. If you value yourself, that will be reflected in the external world.
Yeah. And also you're going to be much more invested in what it is that you're buying as well, you know?
And you're inherently, and I understand there's people out there that are trying to scam people for money, but on the side of you giving your money, you're pushing past an edge just doing that. So you're doing something you've never done before. So then you have to deal with the emotions and the feelings and the circumstances that come up around that. And then how are you going to respond? You know, I was someone who was always like, you know, like fuck paying all this money for coaches. Fuck, I'll figure it out my own. I'll read a book. I'll do a thing. And one time I got on a call with someone some years back, and he's like, this is my 6-month program. I was like, that doesn't work. And he's like, 3-month program, this much. And I went, fuck it. I got a credit card. And one thing that he told me to do in that set the stage for so much to follow that has brought me to where I am right now. And so worth it. It was totally worth it.
Yeah. If you get one thing that shifts your awareness or changes the course of who you are, no amount of money can compensate for that.
True.
No amount. Like there's a lot of charlatans in our industry. And I always say, look for the story to what they've overcome versus what they're teaching. And how did you find out about it? Because a guy asked me for a guarantee the other day. I'm like, I can't guarantee what's going to happen in the world of physics once I help dissolve something for you. Like, I can't do that. But I said, if you want a guarantee, go to the guy that referred me to you. I said, look at how much his life's changed. The greatest testimonial is a referral. And most of my work comes through referral, a little bit through Instagram, but 90% comes through referral. I'm like, I don't need to guarantee or push for business because most of my stuff comes through word of mouth, right? So when you get one thing and shift one thing that could be life-changing, which is just a shift in perspective. You know, I did a workshop with a woman where I said, someone's not coming over, opening up the top of your head and pouring in a jar of anger to make you pissed off at your man. It was a women's workshop. And this woman went into like a 3-day trauma release because just that perspective that she'd taken on, that she'd been making it incumbent upon her man as though he was responsible and the source of her anger, she'd never even thought about looking at it as though it exists inside her. Once she got that, she got to release that anger and their relationship started to get repaired. That was just one tiny little perspective shift. And when you shift your perspective, you shift your world. So if you're able to do that with people like the coach did with you, Yerasimos, like it changes your life. It sets the stage for something magical and brand new. So it's super important to be doing this kind of work with people that have done the work, you know?
Yeah. And it goes back to even what you said earlier in our talk about like, was it like, I don't know, it was like facing a certain type of challenge and hard times. And I feel like we don't have these challenges. We're just so comfortable. You know, we're not putting ourselves in these positions to really test our mettle. So
taking on the hardest task you can think of at that point for who you are. That'll change in time as well. You know, people always think that there's like this horizon where once I reach the horizon, then everything's going to be perfect. But that goal that you want to reach or that horizon, you change as a person. So even when you get that, you're going to be different by the time that you get what you think is going to make you happy. So you're going to be different anyway. So then the horizon's going to shift. So it's about you're chasing horizons at that point. You never really get there.
Yeah.
So once you stop chasing the horizon, you start to shift the internal game, right? So you start playing the internal game instead of the external game. It's not about external shifting or validation or consumption. It's about internal spiritual evolution. Once you play that game, that's the fun. You know, that's where it becomes fun. Like I still write 2 to 3 hours every single day. And I'm in a point of maturity in my work, but I'm still writing and reading and taking things in and analyzing my own mind and expanding on it. You know, it's dedication to your craft. And that's really important as a man as well.
Yeah, bro. Being better than who we were, you know, and that's a challenge that does not end. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Jaguar, final question. What is the single most important lesson that you've ever learned in your life?
Everyone has a good question. Single most important. The single most important was that I realized that wherever I had problems, I was always there. Right. So when I realized that, I stopped blaming the world for what I was going through. I realized I was the common theme. I started to become responsible for my own world. When I took full responsibility, a dude named Jocko Willink wrote a book called Extreme Ownership. If you take 100% responsibility for your life, that is the greatest gift you can give yourself, because then you become powerful. And so when I realized I was the common theme, I was like, oh, fuck. I've been playing the victim card the whole time. Victims like to blame. Powerful people take responsibility.
Well said.
I echo that one, man. 100%. Bro, always such a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you so much for joining us and catching up. Where can people connect with you and get in touch?
Yeah, you're welcome. Like, man, you guys are so awesome, man. Like, I love the conversations that we have, and you know, like, we'll definitely do another one soon. Oh, yeah. Appreciate the platform as well, and so stoked to see your success, you guys, and the guests you've been getting on. Like, it's just phenomenal from where we've come from, where it was just the three of us as I was the first guest, and to a year later to see what you've done. So I just want to acknowledge you guys and the message you're putting out there, and got so much respect and admiration for you guys. It's fucking awesome. Where people can find me is Instagram is Pure Jaguar, Pure Jaguar as it's spelled. Or my website, Jaguar Heart, HEART.co.
Guys, if you feel the call, do not hesitate. Jag is a man of his word and he's a man of action. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and we'll see you all next time.
Smoking mirrors, I'm seeing through the illusion. Waking up in a time, they think you're in a delusion. Somebody set the alarms, cause they be too busy snoozing. I'm in a DeLorean, fast forward in evolution.